this Wednesday, January 26th, regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners to order. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. The Board of Commissioners is fully assembled. We have two items on our agenda today: a discussion of the strategy plan and Affordable Housing Action Plan update, both of which are highly anticipated. We're excited about it. And before we move along, I will check in my list of participants. And at this point, then, we'll go to item 1A on the presentation. And Judy Williams, I will call on you to start the presentation and introduce your panel.
Thank you very much, Chair Farr. Good morning, Chair Farr and Commissioners. It's great to be with you this morning. We have a couple of great items, but the first one, we're bringing a draft to you of the strategic plan. So myself, Judy Williams, I'm the Strategy and Integration Manager here at Lane County. And today with me, I have Michelle Kennedy, who is with Barry Dunn, one of our consultants for this effort, and as well as Tara Warney-Griggs, who is also a consultant working with Barry Dunn on our strategic plan. So welcome, Michelle and Tara. I'm going to start off the presentation and then I will turn it right over to Michelle and Tara.
So I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, Judy.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Can everyone see the presentation?
We do now. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. All right. So just a high-level overview of what we're going to be talking about today, so you have an idea. We have 60 minutes here planned for this item, and so we're planning to just do a 15-20 minute presentation, maybe 20-25, and then really we want to hear from you. And so we're going to go over the engagement activities that we've had thus far, review our the heart of the strategic plan, our mission, vision, core behaviors, values. And then we're going to walk through what are some of the proposed changes in this draft plan. We're going to have opportunities to review these objectives, both at a high level and if interested at that more detailed level, and then really turn it over to you and see your reactions to it. If you have any recommended changes, this is the time. This is a draft form, so we want to get this right. We want to hear from you and see if there are things that are missing, if there's things that could be said better. So this is that time to hopefully get your input. So with regards to engagement, so we kicked off the strategic plan effort, I want to say late October. One of the things that we first started with that kickoff was launching an engagement website. So that's called Social Pinpoint. Through that Social Pinpoint, there's some metrics here on the screen. So we've had a little over 2,000 visits to that. We've had several comments on that engagement effort. We've also advertised, when are we going to have community forums? What are the next steps coming forward? We have a video from our county administrator describing, the importance and why we are really interested in hearing from the community and our employees on this strategic plan. So we've had, through that Social Pinpoint site, we've had 179 survey responses from the community. We've also had a number of comments on what we call the idea wall, so that folks can give input on subject matters that they're interested in hearing more about. With our employees, we also had a separate employee survey, 659 responses, digital responses. We also have a pocket of employees that don't have access to computers at their work site. And so we have given them paper copies. So with that, we have an additional 46 paper surveys that were turned in. So a total around 705 employee responses to the survey. We've had a number of stakeholder interviews. We also still have some planned and scheduled. And so we hope to continue to hear more feedback from stakeholders. And then the community forums have also We've had 4 community forums, all in virtual settings, but really trying to get feedback, input, hear from our residents, hear from our employees as well. We had 3 separate employee forums as well. So all of that, as well as leadership retreats, we've had a lot of effort with our management team, and all of it has been really fascinating and really interesting. So even if, if one visit has 3 or 5 people talking about what their hopes and dreams are for the future, what they look to see, they've been just really meaningful, and we've gotten a lot out of each of those efforts. And so it's been exciting hearing this engagement opportunity, and the importance of that is really to get that input and see how we can incorporate that in our strategic plan. So, our strategic plan really is, especially as you all know, with our organization, we really utilize this regularly. And so this is kind of our roadmap, if you will, in terms of the next few years as to what we're working on. So that's the engagement efforts as a brief summary. So getting into the one of the core pieces that we heard from the beginning, both from the commissioners, from other employees, from our county administrator, just really recognizing that we like a lot of these core, the mission, vision, value. We like the structure. We have a lot of things that we wanted to keep in place. And so it wasn't starting from scratch. It was really kind of adding and adding to the existing plan and work that we've had. So our vision hasn't changed much. We did add a couple of words. So it used to say Lane County is the best county in which to live, work, and play. We added in which all can live, work, and play, to kind of speak to that inclusivity that we're really hoping to gather. Our mission, the draft, has not changed. So we responsibly manage available resources to deliver vital community-centered services with passion, drive, and focus. And our purpose, a lot of great discussion on that with our retreats and further discussions of really, this is where we can connect all of our employees. So how does, everybody come together united and have some commonality? So from the road maintenance worker, parole officer, attorneys, how does everybody relate together? And it's really through that purpose of everyone here in our organization working towards improving lives. The next item, it says strategic priorities. It should say our core behaviors. So this is our core behaviors, who, in terms of retention, who do we have as our employees currently, and who do we want to recruit as well? So really looking for those behaviors that are core to us: passion to serve, driven to connect, and focus on solutions. So those have not changed. We've heard great input from everybody in terms of how they value that. Our strategic lenses is one area that we did have some discussions on, and heard a lot of input as well from some of the community forums too. So one, and you'll see this in red, so we used to have 3 strategic lenses: our financial stewardship lens, equity lens, and collective impact. And we've been putting in a lot of effort and work into our equity lens over the last year and a half. And so we don't need to, I believe, that's the one that we have the most ready and prepared. So while we do have these 2 other lenses existing, we're going to be working through with Barry Dunn to try and help set us up so that we can put some structure and content with those other lenses. And really the lenses are just, it's not a specific objective that we want to achieve in the next couple of years. It's those overarching lenses. What are we looking through in order to do our everyday work? And so having that kind of lens of a stewardship of our resources is what we had proposed to change it to, not limiting it to just financial. Collective impact, and then adding another one that we've heard feedback on related to climate and sustainability. So perhaps that fourth lens of sustainability and climate impact. And then some of the priorities, again, this is our draft recommendation based on what we've heard. And again, a lot of really great key discussions on, you know, what's been missing in this current plan that we're in, what are we know that we have faced in the next few years, and how are we best set up to do that. And so through our priorities, you'll see that the top row is our existing priorities, and you're familiar with these logos as they make up, you know, that Venn diagram that's ingrained into how we use our strategic plan. And those are safe and healthy county, vibrant communities, robust infrastructure, and the last one is our people and partnerships, and that's currently as it exists. After lots of discussion and feedback, our proposal is to really have some small changes, and it's to that fourth one of our people and partnerships. Knowing how important our partnerships are, we do feel like that lens, the collective impact lens, is where we're going to keep that partnership aspect. And you'll see throughout the objectives how partnerships are weaved into so much of what we do. So it's not we're dropping our partnerships. They're very important to our everyday being and how we do and offer services. But the shift from that to our people and organizational health. And so really taking that time and focus on our organizational health. And you'll see, I'll just briefly touch on these and then I'll turn it over to Michelle, who will walk through a little bit further, but really, you know, keeping the same type of objectives under most of these, but in red, you'll see where we've made some suggested changes. So safe and healthy county, it's still that need to have that encompassing health, behavioral health, public safety, homelessness, and really weaving in that interconnectedness of each. On vibrant communities, the one change or a couple changes is affordable housing. That was somewhat encompassed in safe and healthy county. And so we're kind of separating the homelessness work that we have ahead of us and separating out affordable housing into vibrant communities and really lifting that up. So as we know, and throughout nearly every feedback session, that is what rose to the top in every discussion. So affordable housing is added here, addressing economic development, equity, our environment efforts, adding in civic engagement here. And then in robust infrastructure, adding in, you know, broadband work. So what, in addition to the broadband, just community connectivity, referencing our data and how we work with shared data with our partners, adding in emergency preparedness here in this priority, as it was a little bit buried in our people and partnerships prior to this. So really lifting that up as well, as we have a great focus on our emergency preparedness, not only with community efforts, but internally as well. And then our people and organizational health, really definitely a lot of focus on employee well-being and employees' family wrapped in there too. So you'll see that. Also just trying to address how do we best prepare ourselves for now and in the future of keeping the systems that we have, you know, the wheels on the bus, maintaining those core services effectively and efficiently, and really focusing on that, and continuing with the transparency and accountability. So it's encompassing our organizational health in terms of financial, you know, all of the culture, all of those pieces too. So that's in general that broad picture of what our draft plan is proposing. And so I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you, Judy.
Walk through some of our objectives. Thank you.
Yes, board members, it's great to see you this morning. Tara and I are going to take you through each of the 4 strategic priorities and walk you through the objectives that came out of the retreat that we did in I guess it was maybe the 1st of December, and then did some additional work with department leadership to really fine tune those objectives and really try to focus them on the next couple of years, what could be accomplished in the next couple of years. And then we can get into this a little bit later. There are also sub-objectives beneath some of the ones that you're going to see. So if you want to dig in and get into a little bit more detail, we can do that once we get to the discussion portion of today. So the strategic priority of Safe and Healthy County, this is the new goal statement that was developed to really focus, what do we mean by this? And so this goal statement came out of, again, our discussions with you in the facilitated session we had back in December. And then again, department leadership doing some additional work on these to really focus them. And the key to this one is the equitable and integrated approach. Those are the words that are really important in this goal statement. You have those component parts of what makes a safe and healthy county and communities. And so how are we going about that? And the words equitable and integrated approach describe how you're going to go about addressing these things. So the objectives listed here are really focused on that, developing that integrated approach and trying to create that intersection between all of those things that contribute to people not being able to live well in their community. When mental health issues are not addressed, when people don't have a place to live, the fallout of that is a less safe community and people in crisis. And so we want to bring focus to the people that are experiencing those different factors that make it very difficult for them to participate in the community and live their lives. Very much a sense of, we need some investment in our public safety area. There's definitely a need for it to be better resourced. And so just using that word invest was very intentional. The same thing with the juvenile justice programs and the adult and supervision services, and trying to put these together into one department so that it functions well together and that the service delivery in that area can be improved. This next one is about the recommendations that you have already in place to address homelessness, and to complete these recommendations and adapt the way that they're being implemented so that that can be a more successful effort. The focus on health prevention here, it's essential. As you know, the root cause of a good deal of homelessness is people not having access to the very basic services they need in order to keep them healthy and safe. And so the prevention aspect came out very, very strongly. The launching of community partnerships to build greater capacity. The pandemic has gone on much longer than I think any one of us would have expected, and it's taken a lot of effort. And so, Lane County can't do it alone. Your health department can't do it alone. And how do we partner in order to continue the response as it continues to go on for a much longer period of time? And then finally, traffic safety, always an important part of a safe and healthy community, and working through the combination of transportation engineering, but also public education to reduce fatalities on county roads. So those are the 7 objectives that were identified for this strategic priority, Safe and Healthy County. And these 7 objectives would be things that the county would be focusing on over the next couple of years within that priority. I'll turn it over to Tara, who can address the Vibrant Community Strategic Priority.
Yeah, can you all hear me? Great, I just wanted to make sure. I'm using headphones because we have multiple meetings going on in the house. So I don't usually use headphones, so I just want to make sure everyone can hear me fine. So yes, the Vibrant Community, again, we shifted the affordable housing focus over to this one. And there are 5 objectives here. I'll read the strategic goal statement that was developed from the retreat and the department leadership management level folks, having some really, I think, good conversations over the past few weeks. And so it's invest in Lane County residents by fostering engaged communities that have affordable housing options, equitable opportunities, economic vitality, and a healthy environment. And these, and I'll echo what Michelle said as well. You know, none of these things are areas in which Lane County can just change things, right? And so they have to partner with other community organizations, private and nonprofit sector organizations in order to move the needle on these objectives. But the first one's increasing housing affordability, the diversity of the housing stock and supply, serving Lane County residents in order to address the housing crisis, focusing on the intersection of economic development, social justice, and the environment. And when we get down to the end, there are some things underneath each of these that I think will highlight the equity and social justice piece as well. Constructing a multi-use community facility with the emergency management system as the anchor tenant, to kind of serve as a hub for services to the broader community. Building
I beg your pardon,
relationships.
Tara. That is the Eugene M's, I believe, not the emergency management system.
Oh, sorry. What is the M's? Can you describe that? I'm not sure we're familiar with what that is.
It's a local single A long season baseball team.
Oh, so the M's baseball team is the anchor tenant. Got it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So sorry about that.
Pardon my interruption.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's kind of an important thing. It's a major distinction.
They could be called the Emerald also.
I think number 4 is going to be one that we may want to have some additional discussion about too, in terms of how to do that, particularly with the pandemic continuing to just take a lot of people's bandwidth, right? Building relationships with community groups to proactively expand opportunities for equitable and inclusive civic engagement. I think one of the issues that we faced in doing some outreach with different stakeholder groups is just their bandwidth to respond and participate outside of the organized community forums that we hosted. And I know we had representative from the NAACP at, I think, our first community forum, but we haven't been able to really engage some of those groups as deeply as we would like. I'm continuing to do outreach and schedule meetings with folks, but there's just a lot of pressure on them to support their particular kind of service groups, and so they've had a hard time engaging, I think. And then finally, focusing in supporting rural communities by enhancing outreach, sharing consistent information, and effectively planning to best meet their needs. I think these reflect things that came up across all of the different modes of engagement that we've done as kind of just key things that the vast majority of people in the county are concerned about, right? Housing affordability, having facilities to support the mental health needs and homelessness population. There's just this one again too speaks to the need to really flesh out that collective impact lens to help the county be really effective, being that that backbone organization that helps convene different organizations and facilitate those community-wide, those county-wide conversations that have to happen. And I think, Michelle, you have the next one?
Yes. Let me get the slide advanced here.
We do have maybe like 5 more minutes, just 2 more slides, and then we'll make sure we turn it over and more opportunity for digging in a little bit more.
So the robust infrastructure, there was a theme about resiliency here, and so that resilient infrastructure, recognizing the things that are happening around natural disasters, fires, all the things that we're dealing with that are creating a need to make sure our infrastructure is resilient. That also, creates a good return on investment. And then that whole community connectivity piece that folks wanted to feature as it relates to broadband, because that's a heavily component part of being able for people to have opportunity. If they don't have access to broadband, how do they get access to opportunity? So the objectives that you see there, there's again that calling out that specific one about broadband, the ability to share and access data within the county itself. This county wants to be a very data-driven organization that uses data intentionally to make decisions. And so it's how do we do even a better job of sharing data and having those analytics we need to drive our decision making and to use it collaboratively with our partners. That sense of preparedness and operational readiness internally to the county, making sure that is strong and resilient, having those disaster recovery plans in place, and then really figuring out how to utilize county-owned facilities to the highest and best use, and making sure that those are maintained over time, so that infrastructure is protected and available. Tara.
Yeah, so the last strategic priority is our people and organizational health. The strategic goal is invest in our employees, who are the backbone of our organization, and invest in our systems and organizational health so that employees can thrive and residents can experience a more effective government. And there are 5 objectives here. And here I think this reflects the conversation at the retreat, and really, again, themes that came through all of our employee meetings and in the survey results as well, is implementing opportunities to improve employee well-being and promote a positive workplace culture, advancing an inclusive, diverse, and equitable workforce, continuing our path to increase financial stability and overall financial health, building and sustaining and maintaining the systems of our internal services at an adequate and consistent level with other areas of the organization. So making sure that those basic services and systems that the county maintains are not forgotten and are part of these strategic priorities. And then continuing to assess needs and resources and gaps in order to fulfill the goals outlined in the strategic plan. And basically creating those feedback loops to make sure that you all are on track to doing the things that you want to, making sure you can accomplish the things you want to accomplish over the next 5 years.
So with that, we want to open it up for questions and feedback and discussion. And we actually have slides with those sub-objectives on them that includes the more detail. So we can, I would turn it over to you, Chair Farr, to guide us in terms of how you'd like to approach this, if you want to spend some time reacting to and responding to what was presented, or if you would like to go into the deeper dive on each strategic priority with those additional sub-objectives.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. And establish a protocol with the board at this point in time. Are we okay using first names as we address one another in this meeting? Without objection, I'll suggest that we can. That way, it feels a whole lot less formal. So at this point, I want to just quickly say, Tara and Michelle, superb presentation. Thank you very much. Very organized. I love the outline form. And I will turn this over to the Board of Commissioners for discussion, and I'll be looking at the queue. First in the queue today is Commissioner Buck. Good morning, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'm gonna just say the majority of everything that's been presented, I don't have issues with and feel strongly that we are on target. what I want to address is some of our language regarding housing and the unsheltered. And I was able to talk to Ms. Williams a little bit about this in advance. So I'll first go to the Safe Healthy County, because that's where it's first discussed. And this is bullet point number 4 regarding our TAC report implementation. Overall, I do agree we need to make sure that the TAC report is, it's already in progress. A lot of things are underway, but it is not the end all and be all that's going to solve or continue us on our solutions journey. Ultimately, there needs to be more than just the TAC report in here, I believe. If it's just the TAC report, I believe that we're building systems based on yesterday, where that was created when we knew of about 1/3 of the homeless population that we know we are serving today. And I'd like to have some language in there that the TAC report is, for me, just a sub of actually working on the larger concept of sheltering everybody we possibly can in our community. And one other thing in this, under that number 4 in the subcategories below, which we haven't put up above really yet, is how are we going to support the permanent supportive housing units? Meaning, we need programs where we can train and fund those agencies that are actually serving the on-site services. That is an area that I think we need to strengthen. We need to have those mental health professionals in those buildings on an ongoing, regular, in my opinion, full-time basis, and other service providers there. And if we don't have them, we're not going to be successful with the permanent supportive housing model overall. So those are my points on that particular one. And my only other thing I want to talk about is under vibrant communities, and I thank you for already moving there. Under number 1, which is also about housing, this is more where we're talking about affordable housing rather than servicing our unsheltered on the previous strategy priority. Here, I would like to have us call out the Affordable Housing Action Plan and implementation of that plan. I know we're going to be talking about it after this particular item today, but it needs to be listed here as something we want to, work on and implement, especially if this is going to be for our next 3 to 4 year plan. We do have on point number 2 a call out for the climate action plan, which is wonderful, but we need to give the same priority level to the housing action plan as well. And it kind of cursory describes some things that could be included in the housing action plan, but not the plan itself that we adopted and that we're going to be moving forward with and talking about a little bit later. That's my feedback. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. I think you'll find a great deal of support on many of the things that you've stated there. Next in our queue today, we have Vice Chair Krieger.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. That was a perfect teeing up what Commissioner Buck just mentioned. To my comments are more broadly, I wanted to see more integration and inclusion of already existing plans. So that was a perfect example, our housing action plan. And to that end, it's because those plans have what is missing here, which I understand this is a sort of a higher level document, but still, which is specific measurable outcomes. So there, it's all very broad statements about, but without us being able to tag back to the plan and track success and progress toward the goals and objectives. So if those levels of measurable detail are embedded within plans on these critical issues that this broader organizational strategic plan calls out, then that needs to be explicit so that we know to what we're referencing to get to those measures of success. I am trying to read my own writing of what my note says here. I am curious just on the input and process. You mentioned that sort of ongoing and that there's still opportunities. So before I dig maybe in another round with any more specifics on here, I'm curious if you can just share what is still planned. Because I think it came up at our retreat and I heard it again today, the just number of people in the community outside of the organization and inside, but mostly outside of the organization who've had an opportunity to weigh in and inform the plan. So I'm just curious what specifically is sort of on deck to get a little more input to help shape this so that we know this is coming to us from the people who are ultimately being served by this plan.
Yeah, I appreciate your question. I have plans, I have a meeting later on this afternoon with a member of the Climate Advisory Board, and I'm going to contact Devin also later on today to see if perhaps, I can get her assistance in reaching out to some specific individuals as well within some of these other groups over the next week or so. And we still have the open houses coming up, but part of me is wondering if just me as a consultant reaching out has maybe been off-putting, and maybe if Devin and I reach out together, if maybe we'll get a little bit more traction with some groups. And then also I think I'm going to reach back out. I've already met with the Equity and Access Advisory Board folks, but maybe they can provide me some introductions as well, so that I'm not just like, who is this person trying to contact me that we don't know? So, again, just trying to keep, I'm just going to keep, kind of pounding the pavement, if you will, with some of these really key stakeholder groups that we need to get some feedback from.
Okay,
I think too, the other thing I wanted to add in too is, I think, and we talked about this in our planning meeting with Judy and Laura yesterday, is, making sure that as some of these things are implemented, that they are, that there's real proactive outreach, bringing people into those planning conversations, right, and implementation conversations, to make sure that it's not a one-touch, like, oh, hey, can you give us feedback on this plan? But it's, will you help us enact this plan, right? So there's some of that ongoing as well.
Yeah, and so to that end, on 5, in the people and organizational health, I think is the only place where in 5B, it specifically talks about, it's not on the other slide, but in the plan, about bringing back regular quarterly and annual updates to address progress and capacity. I'm not sure why we wouldn't do that for the plan overall, rather than it just living in this one goal area. For example, going back to that issue of the M's, the building a multi-use stadium at the Lane Event Center and Fairgrounds, to, that is a tactic. If the objective is to have, for instance, a vibrant self-supporting Lane Event Center and highest and best value use of our fairgrounds, then building a multi-use stadium is a tactic we might use to get there, but there may be others, or if that one doesn't come to fruition, we don't want to drop off our plan that is an important community asset that we want to ensure its stability and highest and best value use. So there's a little bit, it's a little hard for me to wrap my head around this because of the mix and match of macro and micro and granular and broad, and no specific measurable outcomes.
So we should have, Vice Chair Krieger, we should have mentioned at the very beginning of our presentation, and we neglected to do this. This is coming to you in draft that's not completed yet. We have work to do on the performance measures. So it is absolutely our intention to include measures in this plan. We are not there yet. We will be working with department leadership over the next couple of weeks to begin to put those performance measures together. It's not an actionable strategic plan if we don't have a way to measure progress. So that was intended. And I think we should have been clear in letting you know that you were getting an early draft that did not include those, but the final plan will have them. The second thing that I'd like to offer is what you're seeing in the objectives are the shorter term focus. So one of the challenges that department's leadership conveyed to us is that we need to be long-term in our view, and we also need to be more tactical so we know what we're doing in the next 12 to 24 months. So that's why you see the mixture. And I think one thing we might look at in terms of the structure of the plan is to maybe, I'm not saying we're absolutely going to do this or we should do this, but we should explore it, is like maybe breaking up the objectives into short-term and long-term objectives to make that a little bit more clear, because we do want to give staff guidance of where they need to be focused in the next 12 to 24 months, knowing that this plan is a living document and that you're going to revisit it on a regular basis. You're going to be looking at your plan critically every couple of years and measuring against those outcome measures that you talked about. And doing an intentional update of the plan. So getting that right, long description of the long term with the short term focus that allows you to be successful is something that we were trying to achieve this time.
Thank you, Commissioner Vice Chair Krieger and Ms. Kennedy. I've dispensed with the first names. Nobody else seems to be using them, so whatever you wish to use, is that okay? I think we'll be that informal. At this point, I see no other hands raised in the queue, but Commissioners Bozievich and Bernie, do you wish to have questions? We have about 20 minutes left on this agenda item, which I personally don't mind going over if we need to. I see no, there we go, Commissioner Bozievich, followed by Commissioner Bernie.
Thank you. Let me just say that Judy, Michelle, and Tara, I think you've done a good job of capturing the current board's majority's will in the strategic plan. I'm currently a minority of one on the board. And I can just say that I am not pleased with the direction this is going. I feel that there's too much emphasis on equity and social justice, which are, as a libertarian, are dangerous concepts that quite often get into anti-personal freedom in the name of equal outcomes. So just saying, I'll put that out there. I also feel there's too much emphasis in there on climate change. Something that one, we have very little ability to make any significant change in, and it's outside of our core services. What the plan lacks is the original plan from a couple of years ago's emphasis on our core services and improving those core services. Public safety, roads, permitting, elections, assessment taxation, our FQHCs, those core services we're already involved in, rather than trying to reach out into new areas. So that's just going to express that out there that as a minority of one, although I do believe there's change coming for this board, but I also want to say that I really disliked the one particular objective about the M's, because the board only authorized studying placement of a stadium. That's not a strict strategy at this point. The way that's worded makes it sound like we are already marching ahead with that stadium. And I can guarantee you there is a certain amount of our population that is really wary of getting involved in the stadium business. They've watched multiple communities fund stadiums to only end up with an albatross. as a team moves or closes up shop. So I think we need to have, there's a great idea in working on our master plan. And I personally believe the stadium could be very successful and be a great asset, but we're just studying it right now. We haven't pulled the trigger, and the way that's worded, it looks like we've already pulled the trigger. So that I just want to put that out there. So just be careful of how we word that. So those are my quick comments, and I'll just leave it at that and know that I will probably be outvoted, and I've gotten used to that for three and a half years now. Well, 3 years plus.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. And just one quick statement, Commissioner Burnett, before I go to you, and that is regarding EMS versus EMS. I take personal responsibility for having you, if you were considering that to be the emergency response system, EMS, as opposed to a baseball team, I don't think you'd have put a baseball team in there. So that's my thoughts on that very quickly. And to Tara and Michelle, do you have a response for Commissioner Bozievich, or shall we move directly along to Commissioner Burney?
We can just move on and have Commissioner Burney share.
Very good. We have then Commissioner Burney, and then Commissioner Krieger, Vice Chair Krieger has raised hands for a second round, and I'll speak after Commissioner Burney. Commissioner Burney.
I responded to your call. Yeah, I was all written ready to call people by their first names, but well.
Okay, Joe.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Pat. I only responded to the chair's call because I hadn't. The reason I hadn't responded is because I find all of this pretty philosophical. But you want some feedback. Here's my feedback. First, I think I couldn't agree more with what both Commissioners Buck and Commissioners Krieger. Their comments were excellent. I don't think you quite responded well for me. Of course, Commissioner Krieger is next in the queue, so she'll correct me if I'm incorrect. But I thought her comment about the difference between tactics and strategies, I'll extend it, and the difference between goals, objectives, and then how you get there, tactics and strategies. I actually think that criticism wove through the document for me. I think we need to end up with something. You said it's a draft, I get that, but we need to end up with something that's tighter, that's tight enough to measure, right? And Commissioner Krieger, I think that's what you were alluding to. I couldn't agree with that more. I have to make one comment to Commissioner Bozievich, and that is, we know two things for sure. Yes, this board will change, Commissioner, because you're leaving, and it's been a pleasure to work with you. And two, don't confuse equal opportunity with equal outcomes. I think that's a false equivalency, and I think that any aspect of trying to create equality of opportunity for all is fundamentally different than saying everybody has to achieve the same outcome, the same level, the same everything, because we're all different. And by the way, and this is all now I'm getting philosophical. This is part of why you guys are all going to think I'm a nut now. This is part of why I believe we are seeing the beginning of redefining what work is in America, and redefining it in such a way that it moves more towards organizing work around the particular strengths and talents of individuals that individuals bring to the table, and less around training people to fit into jobs that just doesn't fit them as a human being. So I think that's just an interesting note. Now, getting back to this, I feel very disconnected from this process. I think the COVID and remoteness is probably a part of it. I actually agree with some of what Commissioner Bozovich said about let's not forget core services of county as a unit of government that has operational responsibilities. And at the same time, for me, there's a little redundancy with the strategic lenses, or perhaps intersection or overlap is a better term. But for me, in addition to what Commissioner Buck mentioned, I would also put community benefits. Now, let me explain why I say that. Because that incorporates a real desire to reinvest dollars that we have in local businesses or local activities, or, and forgive me for saying this, local consultants. You know what I mean? But really locally building the community. It also, I won't belabor this for our board because they're completely knowledgeable of what I'm referring to, but ways in which you strategically look at any purchase, any initiative, any activity, and part of the evaluation is how does it benefit the people living in the community? And I don't see that here. One could put words together. Oh, well, collective impact is, no, it's really not. So anyway, those are my inputs. Thank you very much, Pat, for giving me the space to do that. And none of them I feel intensely about, but I just wanted to respond to your call.
Thank you, Joe. Then I'm going to take a turn in the queue before I recall on Vice Chair Krieger. A strategic plan is in place to make sure that we effectively use our resources, including our energy, that we do it to the best of our ability, and we coordinate our efforts among everybody who's a part of the plan and all of the people observing the plan. So there are a lot of parts to it. I am firmly invested in strategic planning. I'm firmly invested in the institutional understanding and awareness of the strategic plan. And I'm firmly invested in solid goals and objectives and in dynamic tactics, which can change daily. It can be adjusted daily and can evolve daily. Now I'm going to show you something that I've shown you all before. Strategic plans that my name is on: Jerry's from 1995, Food for Lane County from 2005, Selco Community Credit Union, our largest local federal community credit union, from 2003, and more recently, an internal one, a strategic plan of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. All of these plans are in place, all of these plans work, and all of these plans did exactly what I envision a plan to do. They bring the entire organization together to use its resources most efficiently and wisely and help us to focus on what we are doing at this moment in time and make sure that our energy at this moment in time is going in the right direction. Understanding that tactics are dynamic, and sometimes tactics have not even been defined as they evolve. So that being said, there are a couple of things that I'll agree with and point to. Measurement pillars of the strategic plan. Commissioner Krieger, you mentioned it. The best way for us to ensure that everybody observing and everybody participating knows that the plan is working is to make certain that we have solid measurement pillars, solid data. You've mentioned that we are a data-driven organization. We need to be able to let others know how that data is progressing. And that we need to be able to report results on a regular basis so that anybody watching and anybody participating knows how we're doing, whether we're achieving our goals, whether we're failing to achieve our goals, or whether we're going the other direction. So we need those measurements to make sure that everybody knows at all time. I'm not going to go into detail on the points. I believe it's pretty well encompassing. I'm not going into detail on majorities of one or majorities of four. Or minorities of one or minorities of four, because we all vary on different things. Sometimes we're a 5 majority, sometimes it's a 4-1, sometimes it's 3-2, sometimes it's a 2-2 with 1 absent. But the fact is we change on a lot of different things. And if we can define the things that we agree on, then we are going to be successful in pushing forward the most important things to the organization, whatever we determine that they're going to be. That's what this is all about to me. That's what strategic planning is all about, is making certain that we as an organization know what we're doing, we measure what we're doing, report what we're doing, and people on the outside can see how we're doing, see the results on a measurable basis. There are some things that are really important, some things that really percolate to the top for me, and they're in there. the intersection of behavioral health and the criminal justice, public safety, and housing. That is so important to the effective use of our resources. An affordable housing plan is so important to the effective use of our resources. Equity and access is so important to the effective use of our resources, as is Commissioner Burney. You always talk about the community benefits. We all understand them, we all know them, and the community benefits aren't just a single thing. There's a lot of things that go into community benefits. It's not just a support of organized labor, for instance. That's not what community benefits is. Community benefits are what benefits the community. Of course, it's a part of our plan. Of course, equity is a part of our plan. And sometimes maybe we shouldn't even have to say it. Maybe we shouldn't even have to say that. Just one very specific thing that Commissioner Buck mentioned, and that is the TAC plan, the TAC report, which we sometimes call it a TAC report. You know, that is I don't think the elements in the report are stale. They are reusable. We can bake them, we can toast them, whatever we need to do to make them feel fresher. But Commissioner Buck, maybe when we call out the 10 recommendations of the TAC report, we might talk about the 10 recommendations first identified in the 2018 Public Shelter Feasibility Study. Because while the TAC report seems kind of old and people are just getting on the bus, don't know what it is, the 10 elements of it really are quite fresh. And the tactics involved in the 10 elements of it are a part of what we do on a regular basis. So that's all I'm going to say at this point in time. I believe, Tara and Michelle, boy, I love what you put forward. It gives us a great deal of latitude for discussion, a great deal of latitude for inclusion. And I think that by and large, I wouldn't take anything out of here, and my wordsmithing would be very minor as we move forward. So with that, I will move along in the queue to, unless you want to, Tara, Michelle, unless you want to say something about that, we can move directly next to Commissioner Krieger, to Lori, who is on a second round.
Thank you, Chair. Very much appreciate your comments, and I'll be brief. I'm watching the time, and I know we haven't heard from our county administrator, who's sort of been the container around all of this and supporting all of this work too. And this may be an opportunity to ask very specifically for him to speak to. To me, when I look at this relative to the other strategic plans, even though I wasn't on the board at that time, I have reviewed them and of course have been working under them in my first year. What I like is that the mission, you know, it's big and broad, and the county has incredible depth and breadth of what we do and the services we provide. And most people have no, sort of average folks out in the community have no concept of the depth and breadth of the services. And the word services is in the mission. And I really appreciate Commissioner Bozovich's comment, because it gives an opportunity to say that I don't disagree with him that core services are what we do. What this plan does is it talks about the how and why we do them. It's saying some of the same things about prioritizing the services, but in a different language. And that is a language of public health equity, which is a language of addressing human needs. And that's what we're here for, right? Improving lives, human lives. And so I don't see a disconnect between the services we provide, the core services. What I see is reframing how we talk about how we're going to deliver those services and why they matter, using equity language. And that gets to our equity lenses, which we haven't had historically in the organization. And I think that's where there's some just transition in learning how to talk about those very core services that are our fundamental responsibility as a county government to deliver. I don't know if there's an opportunity for our county administrator to maybe speak to that a little bit.
Thank you, Vice Chair Krieger. And before I ask you to turn on your mic, Steve Mokrowski, and I will ask you to do that. One thing I forgot to mention is that a permanent revenue stream. In 1996, the city of Eugene put forward asked for a 1% utility fee to support, to be a permanent revenue stream for housing, for low-income housing, it was called at the time. It failed the ballot box. So 1%, which was about $1 a month per household, failed. If we had passed it at that point in time, that would have been at the time $1 million a year. Think of how that would have compounded. $1 per month per household, how that would have compounded through the years to give us so much more that we have right now in infrastructure because of a permanent revenue stream. Now, this is early in a discussion of a permanent revenue stream, but can we have discussion as we move forward strategically of a permanent revenue stream that people understand, will support, and that can give us an ongoing, in perpetuity, for posterity, revenue stream that is dedicated to housing, homelessness, and poverty. Mr. Mokrahisi.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, and everyone who's been participating. I think this is a really good discussion that the board has been having. I'm going to just maybe make a few comments and step back sort of to the proverbial 30,000 feet for a minute, just to set the context for, I think, why strategic plans are really important and why this strategic plan is really important. And I'll use an analogy here that will be an imperfect analogy, but just to try to, because it evokes, I think, some visuals and feelings to kind of give a sense of the path that we've been on, this trajectory we've been on in the last few years. And so, we've had our strategic plan, this version of a strategic plan that we developed around 2015, kind of really trying to create some focus. Getting our own house in order, financial management and stewardship, doing some of the core nuts and bolts. And as most organizations and communities have, we've continued to evolve, and we've seen certainly changes in priorities over the year and over the last few years. And I'd say the couple years before the pandemic, we saw a change in our board leadership, and we saw a renewed focus on a few areas. And as we're coming to sort of grips and adjusting and look and really focusing on a number of these areas around climate action and equity and a number of things, boom, the pandemic hits, right, in early 2020. And it was sort of, I'll use this analogy of like a tsunami, right? It just sort of hit us. And it froze us in time, I think, in this moment of like, we pushed everything else aside and said, we're just dealing with this because we have the public health, we're the public health authority, and we have to deal with this real crisis that we had never dealt with before. So it was a frozen in time moment. And then of course the wildfires, right? In 2020, we can really chalk up to like being frozen and trying to just sort of get our bearings, figuring out where are we? What are we doing? How do we, so all the things that we had been focused on prior to that, it's not that we weren't doing them, we still did them, but our attention was just largely focused on the uncertainty of this new thing we were dealing with. And then we pivot into 2021, and 2021 really brings this, okay, we're starting to come out with vaccines and more important, right? And we're starting to regroup and some elements of recovering we're contemplating. And now in 2022, it is, I think, feeling like there's this overwhelming feeling of being overwhelmed. There's so much work. There are certainly resources available and so much work. And frankly, we lack a little bit of focus because we're doing a lot. We're also, there's adjustments happening in the workforce. So we're seeing transitions. We're seeing people retire and people leave and needing to fill critical positions. So all this transition is happening at the same time. There's a huge demand for work. So people are feeling overwhelmed, and we're dealing with that reality. So now is such a critical time for us to be able to develop a plan that refocuses us, right? And so this plan is as much as the things that are identified on here will be our focus. It's also important to acknowledge what isn't on this plan is not going to receive a lot of focus, right? And we're going to have enough challenge just getting the work done that is identified within this plan. So I just want to, that to me is the critical element, and for staff of having a strategic plan, is that it gives us focus. Once the board ultimately lands on the final plan and it's approved, we then take that and say, this is the plan. And we are going to do everything we can to not get distracted by a lot of other things, because this is the work that we're focused on. So with that, I think there's a lot of really good things here. I wanted to just make a particular comment about the mission, vision, and the lenses in particular. So maybe we can go to that slide. And I know we are sort of out of time here and needing to move on to we're not out of time. We have, some additional time to wrap up. So you do have some time. But if we can go, I'm not sure who's controlling the slides, but just go to that slide. And I just wanted to offer a comment about the lenses. And I'm not seeing this. I don't know if others are seeing the slide. I'm not seeing the slides. So if somebody can move to that. The lenses we added, we spent a lot of work on these 3 lenses, and particularly the equity lens over the course of we spent the better part of the last year developing an equity lens, and then implementing that equity lens across the organization. And when we say we have a lens, it really means something. It's not like, we're going to sort of make a consideration here. It really requires a significant amount of process related work, because we take our lenses seriously. So from an equity standpoint, we've talked about the creation of a new department of youth services and parole and probation. We paused that effort for several weeks before we sort of continued moving in that direction. Say we need to really run through this equity lens, right? So we took the time to do that. The same was true with other initiatives that we previously pursued, where we've said we need to actually make sure that we're committed to that. So I just, and as we've made changes to the words, I see financial stewardship, we've changed as stewardship of resources. I think that's a good change. And I'm offering just, I guess, if not or an ask for maybe it's an ask for reconsideration, or just to make sure that if we're going to add a new lens around sustainability and climate impact, that we really know what that means. And I would ask maybe for us to consider, and this doesn't have to be decided today, if possibly, sustainability and climate impact is part of stewardship of resources, because I think resources are both financial resources, they're people resources, and they're our environmental resources. So I just wanted to offer that there's a lot of that. The strategies and goals, they're going to come and go, right? We're going to pursue strategies and goals, and then we'll accomplish them, and then we'll move on to other things. So they're living. This page, and I don't want to say it's stagnant, it's living, and it's always up for adjustment. But we really try to maintain these pieces here: our vision, our mission, our purpose, our priorities. Actually, it's not strategic priorities, but it's core behaviors. And then our strategic lenses as being these things that sort of, they don't change as much as the goals and the strategies do. So I just wanted to offer that, and maybe an opportunity for us to think about incorporating the elements of sustainability and climate impact into that stewardship of resource. I know I took a lot of time there. That's my 2 cents. Happy to answer any other questions or thoughts. Thanks.
When the Beatles were filming Let It Be, John Lennon said, let's do it again because we'll never have a chance to do it again. So let's not worry about time at this point in time. Let's do it right as we move forward. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you. I completely understand Steve's comments. He's got to run this place. And after a year of chair, I appreciate that. Steve, I think you could put everything under stewardship of resources. So, to me, that's why I said this is I think that the management team is more important than these words on these documents. Nonetheless, I'm not going to fight and die over any of them. I would like to say this, and I feel a need to, so thank you, Chair. This is just going to take him. And the comments that Mr. Mokrzycki made, and then Pat, that you made, it was like, I felt like applauding your comments. I would like to say that, in a democracy, the most important opinion is minority opinion. It really is. And if we don't listen to everyone, we're not practicing democracy. So when you separate, forgive my words, the political bullshit from the human interactions, I really need to say something here. And forgive me, but it's about Commissioner Bozovich. There has been no one on this body that's been more willing to engage me in civil discussion and debate so that we could each learn from and understand one another's perspectives and modify them, maybe, if and when appropriate, than Jay has. there's been no one that helped me more when I had an outpatient surgery, and he and I park our cars next to each other, just getting to the damn board meetings, than Jay has. I think that like Pat said, I would say 80% of the votes of this body are unanimous. The focus, if we're going to have a bias towards action, the focus is always going to be on what do we agree on, not what do we disagree on, because we can't move efficiently on what we disagree on. So while I know, Jay, that sometimes we have different perspectives, I want to publicly tell you that not only has it been a pleasure, is it a pleasure for me to have you on this body and to be on this body too. I know you certainly precede me, but it's added to the overall quality of debate, and the overall quality of debate is necessary to get to the best possible solution. So I just want to say that because of how much I disagree that this is reflecting any political ideology whatsoever. I think this is reflecting our need to provide this management team with our support for good government, to provide as many services to make life better for as many people as possible. So that's what I wanted to say. And so that's all I will say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I'm going to ask, thank you for that, Commissioner Burney, and we're going to skip any more hands up in the queue, ask if there's any summary that Barry Dunn would like to add. But last, I'm going to use my latitude as a chair. We get to be chair. We take turns being the chair. I'm the chair right now. So I'm going to use a little bit of latitude to say something that's really important to me. However we feel about the strategic plan, whether as participants or observers, if we measure results, chart them, and show them, then people will understand what is happening with the strategic plan, and they'll buy into and participate in and appreciate the results if we can report them graphically. That's something that we need to do a far better job of doing, so that people who have an issue with, for instance, homeless campers on the corner, people who have, for instance, issues with people waving their hands and running across the street, or whatever it may be, so that we can report the results, whether they're positive results, negative results, or no change, reporting the results. And at this point, Mr. Mokrajewski, and to the board, I will turn it back to Barry Dunn for a summary.
Chair, I do see Commissioner Krieger's hand is up.
We are moving deep into our next agenda item. Vice Chair Krieger, I'll give you a third round.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be sure, and perhaps your summary was going to cover it, that there's the direction needed around this issue of whether we're adding a strategic lens or not. That seems like a pretty critical piece of direction that could be used at this time from the board. And from my position, what our administrator just shared, and as I think about what the equity lens means and the work behind it, being sensitive to the fact that there's work behind all of this, I would be okay with that not being called out as a strategic lens, but then that means we need to find other places to call out that work around climate, our climate action plan and climate mitigation, and in other parts it needs to be embedded within other goal areas and objectives.
Thank you, Vice Chair Krieger. And just very quickly, that is, as we finish this meeting today, that is still there as a point of discussion. And back to Michelle and Tara. Thank you so much once again. Please, your summary.
Trying to unmute myself there. I just wanted to thank the board for all of your direction and your thoughtful comments. This was an excellent discussion. This is exactly what we were looking for from you. Again, our apologies for not making clear up front that this plan is absolutely intended to have performance measures. That's actually our next step, is to begin working on those. We wanted guidance from you to make sure that you were pleased with the strategic priorities and goals, and that this was headed in the right direction before we started determining what needs to be measured. So we feel like we have some good direction from you. As was mentioned by Tara earlier, one of the next steps then, after we refine performance measures and get those into the plan and incorporate your feedback, is to then take the draft and conduct some open houses within the community and with staff to share and get some additional input, as well as continuing to try to get to a few more stakeholders and stakeholder groups, as we've discussed earlier. And then that further development of the strategic lenses, where I think we can take that feedback around, do we need to add that fourth lens and put definition around the ones that we already have. And then we will be coming back to you to present the final draft for your review and adoption. So the next draft you see will include the pieces that you've indicated need to be in here, particularly the performance measures, and then the additional community input that we receive on the draft itself. Tara, anything to add to that? And then I just look to Judy to make sure that I didn't leave anything out.
Giving a moment for Tara. I would just say thank you, Michelle, and thanks to each and every one of you. I took a lot of notes, and I think all great feedback. In addition to just, some of these items that we did have on there they're a work in progress. So while, like after this discussion, we're going to talk about affordable housing. So definitely mixing in, as we have those conversations, as we hear more input from you on subject matters, or, parks funding task force next board meeting. So as those conversations happen, we'll be working to funnel that through and make sure that we're coming back with those draft objectives, tactics that really reflect those active conversations that are still happening. But I appreciate each and every one of you giving your feedback and attention to this. And it's been great working with everybody, employees, management team, everybody in the community. So thank you for your time this morning.
Fantastic. And as we summarize, I will withstand the temptation to talk again about measurement pillars that are charted that everybody can see. Oops, I didn't withstand the temptation. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. Wonderful presentation. I think we got a lot from it. And to Michelle and Tara, thank you. We'll see you very, very soon. And thank you, board, for great participation. We'll move along to item 1B today, which is a discussion of the Affordable Housing Action Plan. Today, again, Mr. Mokrahajski, I believe we have Judy Williams joined by Sarai Johnson, but I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Mokrahajski, to introduce your panel.
And I believe that Judy and Sarai are going to take this and lead it. I know this is a long anticipated update by the board, so I don't want to take any more time. Judy and Sarai, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Good morning again, Judy Williams, Strategy and Integration Manager, and Sarai Johnson is here as well. So we do have we've scheduled 60 minutes. We want to have the time to have a good conversation. So we have, maybe around a 20-minute presentation, but really trying to get to that piece where we can get your feedback. So thank you for your time this morning. We're here to talk about affordable housing and what we've been up to. So, really a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about today is touching on what we've accomplished thus far. So an update on our action plan, our supporting plan. So really that Oregon's regional housing needs analysis, and we'll go into that in a little more detail. And then talk about some of the specific priorities that were identified in the housing action plan and how we might prioritize those, how staff recommends prioritizing some of these in addition to some additional recommendations, and then turn it over to you to get that feedback and further input. And then just again, talk about next steps and where do we go from there with regular updates as well. And before I get too far into the weeds of this really important item, I think I wanted to make a couple of acknowledgments. And I think just one, come on the heels of the conversation around strategic planning and knowing the the importance of affordable housing and the crisis that we're in. And, this is one of those items that is a priority for anybody and everybody that you talk to. And so recognizing the critical nature of this conversation and just the reality of us not being exactly where we want to be with an update to you. So we are really trying to, Soraya and I have been trying our darndest to come together, create a team, create some next steps, and really move this work forward because we are really passionate about it. But the reality has been that there just hasn't been that capacity thus far. And that one of the reasons in the strategic plan that we're trying to build in that check of not just progress, but capacity to do some of these important pieces. So we are in the next couple of months having some efforts in county administration to bring a team together, and we're identifying some positions that will be a part of that team. And one of the pieces to that is having affordable housing in this team that will really have a dedicated person to doing this full time. And so we've been trying to kind of limp this along, unfortunately, and just as we can get to it, but we're really excited to be having that opportunity to have some consistent time. So I just wanted to have that acknowledgement. So in terms of our affordable housing effort, just to kind of summarize the history, we worked really closely with Karin Knudsen and the Better Housing Together team to create, a roadmap. What are we working towards? What can the county look to in terms of how is our role putting together an effort for affordable housing? So last December of 2020, we adopted that Affordable Housing Action Plan. And since then, Soraya and I have been co-leading the efforts to try and implement this housing action plan. We put a cross-sectional steering team together. We've established those principles that I think are really key early on, so that it's really laid the foundation for either upcoming grants or upcoming conversations about how do we want to initiate something, or how do we want to implement things moving forward, and establishing those really core principles around, one, are we doing this equitably? Two, the collaborative nature of this. We can't do this work alone. And third, just, really trying to be bold and trying new things to get at this crisis that we're in. We've had some really great conversations with local builders and other stakeholders trying to get at, we're all in this together. We all know that this is a priority. What are some of the barriers that you're seeing? What are some of the ideas? Can we get creative around how to move forward with some steps that will help to address this really big issue? We've secured some grant funding. So when we were receiving a lot of information about the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, we poured through this action plan. I'm trying to pull out anything and everything that we can, and applied for a lot of anything and everything that we could. We did secure some funding, and it's through the states, ARPA, the American Rescue Plan dollars. So that is, we'll talk about that a little bit further, but that's some exciting news of $500,000 to work with homeowner assistance. So in terms of how we're informing, putting together priorities, really this was laid out in the action plan of what are the immediate next steps. So we've been working to really integrate and cross-pollinate, if you will, the specific priorities in the action plan. And there's 5 general categories with 20 overall strategies on how to achieve those pieces. And so one of the strategies is really just, as much as we can, integrating them into the plans that we have, into our poverty and homelessness work, into our climate action plan, into economic development plans, and really trying to expand efforts that way. The other piece here is really, how do we initiate a housing production plan? There's several key pieces to this. It's not just creating options of diverse housing, but it's the supply too. So really trying to get at the targeted production goals, having those conversations, key conversations with other jurisdictions, and how do we come together with kind of a combined effort to have a plan for what we're going to be looking at. So this helped to frame our priorities. And so the next pieces were, what's rising to, how can we be most efficient with the limited time that we have? And so in the strategies, and this is in the documents, if anyone's interested in following along, in the packet material, attachment A has those specific categories and strategies of the Affordable Housing Action Plan. So how do we kind of use our resources best? And a lot of the strategies they all have how a scale of impact and the speed of impact. And so focusing on putting those at the top, what rises to the top when we're looking at scale of impact and speed, and it's these 4 items. And so while these are kind of rising to the top, which is create a process for tax foreclosure, first right of refusal, there is great progress that has been happening at the county. And so while this is still can be a priority to try and spell out in writing, kind of those next steps, it's happening, and it's happening well. We do want to bring in additional jurisdictions on those conversations around supply and land conversations in general. The second item is lead interjurisdictional faith community housing development. And so hoping to have that continue to be a priority as some next steps in having those critical conversations. The third is a pilot affordable rural ADU programs for homeowners. And I think you'll see this in the next slide where these are the priorities that are kind of rising to the top, but we also are recommending that we expand these a little bit too. So the last one is seed a revolving loan fund for property acquisition and construction. So that while that's a very specific one, you'll see in our next slide with our recommendations, we're hoping to expand that a little bit so that we can, capture these really critical pieces that were already laid out. But, for instance, on the revenue side, are there other items that we can come up with in addition to that might get at the specific collaboration discussions that might need to happen soon? So the feedback that went into how we're looking at recommending priorities is really following the Affordable Housing Action Plan, weaving in, and we'll talk about this soon, kind of that regional housing needs analysis, and how do we get some of the data and the numbers to know where our targets need to be, weaving in the strategic plan and what those objectives need to be there. This is a great conversation following the strategic plan and how we can update this and get it to be where it needs to be. And also address current capacity, which we truthfully hope to see a lot more capacity very soon.
One of the things on that is also what we're trying to do is make sure that we can present to you as the board what is possible with our current capacity to do in whatever period of time. So it's not too different from how we've been approaching a lot of TAC recommended projects to make sure that we can accomplish those things within, a fiscal year or 2 fiscal years or whatever it might be. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at today is really from between now and the end of fiscal year 23, which will start, of course, in July. We have these things in mind for things we believe we can accomplish with our current capacity, which does include adding that additional capacity for kind of someone to implement and run this plan. So some of the first things we've got are to align our housing objectives with all of their existing plans, including our economic, climate, preparedness and recovery plans, as well as anything else that has components of potential housing needs or opportunities. I'll also include in that, just as a sidebar, I think similarly to shelter as well. So if we're building community facilities anywhere and everywhere throughout the county, then it would, I think, be very valuable for us to look at housing and shelter opportunities along with any of those projects. We want to continue to evaluate our county-owned properties and other underutilized properties that may be privately owned or otherwise for potential housing options. And again, this is throughout the county. We've done a lot of this work within the city of Eugene, UGB, over the last year and a half, and will, I'm sure, continue to do that with them, but also intend to reach out to Springfield and Cottage Grove and Florence, as well as other communities. We do, as we had on that previous slide, adding a revolving loan fund is one of the clear recommendations within the Affordable Housing Action Plan. We think that's one of many really good activities and or initiatives that we can undertake. We also want to be flexible and innovative with financial partnerships and collaborations so that we can expand opportunities for housing developers, homeowners, potential homeowners, folks who currently don't have housing, who would like to enter into housing, and others, so that we can finance our way toward building enough housing stock to house the people who live here. We also want to support our rural communities. We'll be doing some pilots. Some of the recommendations within the Affordable Housing Action Plan are permanent kind of affordability strategies like community land trusts, limited equity cooperatives. We have some good examples of that starting to happen in our metro area as well as in Cottage Grove. And we also would like to leverage our relationships and the work that our educational institutions, including Lane ESD, LCC, U of O, et cetera, to increase our skilled labor, supporting trades and supporting different career ladders for people to enter into who are interested in designing, building housing. And then leading that faith community housing project. Ultimately, we would look at this as a pilot to start with. There are already a couple of great examples of how this is working in our own community here in Eugene. I'm gonna get the name of this church wrong. I'm sorry, everyone. I want to say it's First Congregational. It's on 24th. They were able to put 2 units of housing on their property, just full size affordable housing. We also have a great example in the project that Square One Villages is pursuing with a Peace, I want to say Lutheran Church on River Road for Peace Village. And that's a tiny home village that they'll be building and still collaborating with the existing congregation there. So I think we have a lot of really great opportunity. As I'm sure you can see driving around town, there's a good amount of land that many of these faith communities occupy. And so looking to join forces with them and making sure that we're making great use of the land we do have available upon which to build. The regional housing needs analysis was conducted over the last couple of years. It was a result of House Bill 2003 from the Oregon State Legislature. And that work was conducted in partnership with OHCS, Oregon Housing Community Services, the Department of Land Conservation. I never remember all the names. Anyway, DOCD. And that, thank you, Commissioner Bard, Chair. That's helpful. So that is something that was done over the last couple of years. It did result in a very expansive technical report, which is accessible online. And that does have projections for the need to build over the next 20 years in every UGB in the state. And so we're part of a region that kind of stretches up towards Salem. And I think kind of we're maybe as far south as it goes, kind of captures in like Lynn Benton counties. So we're part of that, but we also have specific information based on their analysis, which you can read all that methodology in their technical report if you're interested, about our UGBs here in Lane County. One of the things that we also know is it does not have any recommendations for unit production in our unincorporated areas, but since we do have the Holiday Farm fire we're still in recovery from, we know that we still need to add a good amount of units upriver to replace those that were lost in that fire. And more specifically, this is what this actually looks like. So there's 3 different ways that the team who did this analysis worked on identifying what the need is. One, they use population projections and growth projections to identify the need, the projected need. Then we have our making up for underproduction of housing over the last many decades. Most of the state has not kept pace with our own population growth. And then of course, housing for people who are currently without housing. And this is also something that of course dovetails in with the work that we're doing overall on homelessness and response for people who are currently unhoused. They also develop these recommendations based on area median income. So the 0 to 30% all the way up to 120%, identifying within each of these three categories, projected need, underproduction need that we need to get into, and then the housing for those who are unhoused by income level. So we have some really specific numbers. These are the roll-up numbers for the whole county, but again, we do have this divided out by urban growth boundary for each of the municipalities in the county. I'm not going to read through all of these numbers, but I am going to show you what they are so you can see if you are interested in tables and grids. I will also send you all this presentation after we're done here today too. So we have pretty solid targets. We have overall for all of the growth that we're projecting, they're suggesting 7,068. This is based on their high estimate. They also have a low estimate. We have work to make up for underproduction of about 6,000, a little over 6,000, and then to create enough housing for those who are currently unhoused, they have an estimate of around 3,000 units. In all reality, that matches up with what we know about the number of folks who are experiencing homelessness on any given month here in Lane County. So it does track with other information that we have. So ultimately what we would be looking at is over the next 5 years, a production target of about 16,403, to be precise, units of housing throughout the county, and the lower estimate comes in just under 11,000. So we have kind of that range within about 5,000 units of each other. But this is, I think, a good picture of what our production targets might need to look like. And this also does give us opportunity to work with our municipalities to determine what the county can do to support their efforts in production and their strategies on making that all happen, so that we're not necessarily going in and saying, hey, you need to do this, Lawrence, but rather we can work with them and with their own local resources to support their work in whatever way we can. So we need to create that production plan. We're going to have to connect with different municipal leaders. We'll select appropriate production metrics to measure that progress over time. We will use the Oregon state provided housing production strategies guidance. That guidance, I believe, has been instrumental in the city of Eugene with their housing and implementation pipeline. So we'll be able to see some good cross-pollination on that. And then we'll learn from our partners and others as we go and adapt and refine these plans over time. So while we have production targets, we also will, of course, continue to be nimble and responsive to the needs in the community because things are changing all the time. So we need to make sure that we're making room for that. These are the progress indicators that are recommended in the Affordable Housing Action Plan, as you've already seen these before. So I think that we have a good amount of work to do on further defining these metrics. These are all lagging indicators, and so it will take us some time to be able to identify year over year what's happening. So it's kind of like it could be a running count, or I think we do need additional indicators and metrics so that we can identify progress on each individual project as well, and all the strategies. So how are community land trusts working? Is that actually improving affordability? How many more people are able to access homeownership than were before, and things like that. So we haven't defined all of those yet, and hoping during the conversation, if you have ideas about what you would like to see as a measure, we would love to take that into account, and then we'll continue doing this work on developing our outcomes and measures within our steering committee and with partners. As Judy mentioned, we do have a homeownership seed fund. This is one of the first financial resources we're able to apply to the Affordable Housing Action Plan. This fund is intended to expand BIPOC homeownership in Lane County. traditionally and historically, of course, people of color have been had less access to homeownership opportunities than the general population. And that is something that we are looking to support expanding in our community. We have not written the RFP for this yet, but we do expect to see a variety of different kinds of proposals. We would like to see additional units to be built with this money, and or additional subsidy if needed to help people get into a homeownership opportunity if they're available. And now we'll turn it over to you, Chair, unless you have anything else to add, Judy, before we kind of pass it on.
Thank you, Sarai. Just super briefly, I was just going to say that in addition, we're having some good conversations now as well. So weaving in, having a great conversation with Commissioner Burney about how maybe another specific idea might be able to be applied. And so trying to, when we come together with these staff recommended priorities, trying to leave flexibility, and so that we can further explore these and see how we can implement those. And in addition, having some good conversation with Karen Knudsen lately. And so we also have another meeting with her tomorrow to see, my goal is to see if there's anything specific that Better Housing Together can either help put a proposal together to see how we can further work on getting to some of these pieces. So maybe it's another grant, perhaps opportunity with Better Housing Together to launch us further along in this effort. But regardless, I think just having her guidance too, and as she's done some great work in the state. So having some of those current conversations now, but thank you, Sarai. And so we'll just turn it back over to you, kind of reactions, other input that you're hoping to see. And so thank you. Turn it over to you, Chair Farr.
Well, thank you, Judy and Sarai. And Judy, you said you weren't prepared for this presentation. Boy, I'd love to see it when you are prepared. If that was unprepared, good job, smashing presentation. Board, we have what I'll call a hard deck of 11:30 today, based on commitment that Metro has for the Eugene City Council's regular work session. So we will be ceasing broadcast at 11:30. I'll place myself last in the queue. In an ideal world, I won't have to speak because you'll have all said it. So I'll move directly to the queue and mention this, that the staff has asked specifically for recommendations on what is item 3 in our board in the packet for today, 3 items 1 through 5, which are the recommended priorities, the 5 recommended priorities, which were shown on a slide. They're also in our board packet that's available to anybody observing. So I'm going to move directly into the queue, and I see nobody. Excellent. Commissioner Buck.
I'll start it off. I am very pleased to see the report today. And I know we're trying to jumpstart this year, and I appreciate all the effort that's done even in very challenging times last year, and well, last 2 years really. I am very supportive of the direction that you're going. And I know that with some more dedicated effort, we'll be able to really get into this this year. And I'm glad to see that conversations are really happening again with Better Housing Together. So our collective efforts will really be able to move this forward. I think this is one of the very top issues that our residents in Wayne County want us to be working on. And of course, it works in conjunction with our unsheltered needs, but it's all collectively something that impacts them on a daily level. So thank you both Judy and Sarai for bringing this to us and keeping this moving along. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. I'm looking to the queue for Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you, Pat. We'll use first names. So I'll just say that, the recommendations, once again, I'll express my concern that they're heavily dependent on government actions to solve this problem. Government cannot build 16,000 units of housing in 5 years. And I just want to say that slide in particular bothers me, because we should be talking about the production of for all levels of income, not just lower levels of income, because underproduction at the upper levels of income creates what's known in the realty community as buy down, and takes up the capacity for low income people, because upper income people are buying down and overpricing housing stock that shouldn't be that expensive. I mean, one only has to look at a listing for a house in older sections of Bethel now that are $350,000. They shouldn't be in that price range. And it just, so we need to talk about building all levels of housing and freeing up all levels in every way we can. And the one thing that seems to be missing in this whole conversation is we need to push the city of Eugene, our largest available place to build housing, to complete the work they promised to do when the home builders and several other people agreed to allow Envision Eugene to be adopted, with the timeline for adopting urban reserves and doing another needed housing study. And they're just dragging their heels about doing a lot of that work, and including starting to talk about starting to go against transportation projects that would support that growth. I'm starting to hear stirrings that they're trying to pull the Beltline improvements over the river off of their transportation plan. We need to have a philosophy as a board that we want the city of Eugene to do that work to establish those urban reserves, so it's a lot easier to move their UGB in the future, and to complete their housing studies on time as promised. That's going to be the biggest impact on housing that government can have to make land available to the private sector to develop housing. That's going to get us housing units. So I just want to say that's the one thing I see missing in this is a philosophy around pushing for completing the actions that were promised in the much, much, much delayed adoption of Envision Eugene, that it included absolutely no expansion of the UGB for needed housing. So said my piece, got that in there. I really do, there are some things in there that I do support that actually have some government action. The particular item around trying to do skilled trade training and some of that work, I think is very important. Our lack of skilled construction labor in the country is a real problem. Try and get a builder booked for this year, period. You can't book a new house construction until probably 2023, with completion maybe in 2024. Enough said, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Jay, for the points you made. If I do have a chance in the queue, you'll hear me elaborate on Envision Eugene and the conclusions of Envision Eugene that we're living with. Commissioner Joe, and then Lori.
You can call me CJ for short. I agree with everything in here. Bravo, but they're words on paper to me. I mean, they are to everyone, right? Except for Sarai, you and Judy, you, I mean, you're in it, so you know where things are happening. But here's the points I would like to make. There should also be a category of keeping those vulnerable in their homes, You've heard me talk about the patrician. The patrician was 86 families, most of whom would have been kicked to the streets if in fact development occurred on that manufactured home thing. There are 108 manufactured home parks in Lane County. I think and there's also the issue of the elderly that can't pay increasing property taxes. So to me, that's a whole other category that we might look at. I want to share with you that there's just south of 1,000 new homes being built in Springfield as we speak. Don't know if you're aware of that, between Hayden and Horton. Things can be done. But I also want to say, when we talk about our housing production goals, unless I'm mistaken, we're not going to build one house. I mean, maybe Homes for Good will build a few units. I think the challenge here is how do we pragmatically provide incentive or subsidy to the various private interests that build homes, whether that's land, as Commissioner Bozovich mentioned, whether it's programs that provide favorable interest rates to building homes for certain target levels and that are attached to first-time home buyer dollars that can give them their down payment and then lean that as a second against the house. There's a variety of ways to do this, and ways in which that's forgivable and not. Most government programs I've seen make the mistake of not leveraging the private sector to run and operate the program with simply providing incentives and goals and requirements. And there are tremendous opportunities in that regard that I would love to assist you with. And I guess that's it for me. I'm all for this, but I just want to remind us the best thing we as a unit of government can do is work with those that will invest exponentially more money in the production of housing. And that one other category. That's all I have, but thank you very much, Judy and Sarai.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Vice Chair Krieger.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief in the interest of time. I'm fully supportive. I'm happy to see any report on implementation of this plan. And so rather than digging in to the particulars at this time, I'll give a broad global yay. And the next area that I'm most interested in hearing back from is how we as an organization are doing what we are doing, how the board can support that all important capacity piece for us as an organization to move forward on plan implementation before we get down into the particulars of which goal area and strategy and progress we're making. We need to make sure we have the internal resources and capacity to do it. And then the only other thing is I'm wondering if it's possible to pull that slide back up to Commissioner Bozovich's point about the inventory shortage at all levels. I believe it does include all income levels. So if we could just get another look at that too. I don't want to trust my memory on much of anything, let alone that. There we go. But just to that point, because I completely agree with him, we need more housing stock for all levels of income and all stages of life, I will add as well. The needs of a single younger person versus perhaps a single aging person is quite different, and everything in between. So I think that this slide did address the concern that Commissioner Bozovich thought was missing. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'll put myself in the queue at this point. You didn't quite cover every single thing that I was going to say, so I have a couple more things to say quickly. First, that the 5 recommendations, I concur with them, concur with what others have said. Commissioner Burney, the 1,000 homes that are under development in Springfield are about 6.1% of the 16,403 that are identified in need. So that's a good start. And those are homes that are being developed on the commercial market by commercial developers. It is the Department of Land Conservation and Development that the state has. So the word development is an important part of it, because that's exactly what we're talking about here today. The thing that we can do something about, and we can focus resources on this, not just for the county, but for the municipalities inside of the county and for the non-incorporated areas inside of the county, like Pleasant Hill and other places like Walton, other places where there are congregations of houses without incorporation. We need to increase the availability of available sites for housing units. In whatever way we can. We talk about ADUs inside and outside of urban growth boundaries. That's one way to do it. To reclassify lands is another way to do it, to make certain that we don't get in the way of legal development as much as we can is another way to do it. But there are so many different ways, Judy and Sarai and Mr. Mokrahayaski, that we can do it. We as a board can facilitate development more than we can actually be the developers. And we should be able to do that. A case in point of governments, I believe, in my estimation, and I can say this fairly because I was on the Eugene City Council for 10 years. I was on the Envision Eugene process from its onset and through its conclusion, where John Reese, after I was elected to the Board of County Commissioners, John Reese, the city manager, would come and sit in my office for hours on end and would talk about Envision Eugene and what happens beyond Envision Eugene, including urban reserves. But what happened at the conclusion of Envision Eugene, a very broad process that got narrowed down and narrowed down. So the participation level was by a very narrow group of participants, in my estimation, came up with the conclusion that there was no need for additional residential land outside of Eugene's existing urban growth boundary, that they had a 20-year supply inside the existing urban growth boundary. Absolutely absurd, unless you do what they did, and that is called duplex lots that have a single house on it, call that 2 houses, even though we know many of them will never be 2 houses. Call houses on housing lots on steep slope 1 or 2 units. We know they'll never be developed. So having a realistic look of what is actually truly developable land for housing is one thing that we can do as a county. Turn up the heat and make certain that all of our municipalities and all of the unincorporated areas are doing the best they can, not to destroy our landscape, not to impinge on everybody's desire to have open spaces outside of urban growth boundaries, but to make certain that we are doing the best that we possibly can to ensure availability of developable sites for housing units. So we can go into more detail on that as we go deeper in this conversation, Judah, because Ms. Williams, I do believe you've provided us with a great outline. This is a wonderful outline, as long as we focus our understanding on more front doors. Whatever a front door means, it does mean a place for a household to live in safety and security. That's what a front door is. We need more front doors. We need to do what we can do as a county. And one of those main things is to facilitate available developable sites for housing units. The last thing that I will say is that, nope, that was the last thing I'm going to say. Mr. Mokrahayaski, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And Commissioners, I just wanted to respond to the question. I think it's absolutely appropriate. Where do we go from here? And do we have the capacity to lead this effort internally? I have had the opportunity to speak with, I think, with all of the commissioners to talk about the concept, but behind the creation of a new team of a policy team that we're in the process of pulling together. We've known for quite some time that one of the significant gaps that we have internally is staffing capacity dedicated to this work of coordinating our affordable housing portfolio work. And Ms. Williams has done incredible work over the course of the past year plus in coordinating that. But as we all know, she has several additional duties in addition to that. And so I've worked with Sarai Johnson, and we will be in that transition. You may note that on the agenda here, Sarai's title says Joint Shelter and Housing Strategist. And she has served in that role for the past couple of years as a joint employee between the city and the county, and has recently transitioned. And we've worked with Sarai. And so that word joint is going to drop out of her title, and she will remain a shelter and housing strategist, but focused on that work here for Lane County. Important to note that, of course, our work around housing, shelter and housing is not done in isolation. So several of you have talked about this, just, not unlike our climate action work or various other policy and legislative initiatives. Lane County cannot solve these challenges, just as we cannot solve affordable housing ourselves. It's not an independent effort. It requires partnership and collaboration in coordination with other public and private sector entities. And so it certainly will continue to be a role for Sarai in leading this portfolio, to continue to coordinate with our city partners, with nonprofit organizations, and the private sector community, and others. So I just wanted to share that. And this is all still, our policy team is still in the development of coming together, but wanted you to feel that, wanted you to know that we've been aware of the need to dedicate a significant resource towards this work, and really excited to have Sarai be able to step up and take this on moving forward. So we'll have more to share on that, but I at least wanted to offer that initial introduction here.
Well, an exciting presentation, Mr. Mokrajewski, with some wonderful staff members as players. Congratulations, Sarai. Most of your work has been focused on the county, and to find that that is going to be officially focused on the county, I am pleased. I told you yesterday that I count on you for your accuracy and your clarity of vision. I will count even more on you for the future, Sarai. Thank you. Mr. Mokrajewski.
I just want to say thank you. Sorry, Chair, to cut you off. I mentioned Judy Williams, and I just, at this transition point, want to just really offer thanks and appreciation to Judy for the work that she has done, and really picking up a ball that was not being advanced. And Judy is does such an incredible job for us as a utility player, that oftentimes it feels like picks up these balls that are not being advanced and then advances them. And she's done an incredible job now of turning, of passing that ball off to Sarai. And so I just want to thank and recognize Judy for the great work that she's done on this portfolio to date.
Thank you, Judy. You've been first base, second base, shortstop, third base, pitcher, catcher, and all the outfield positions. That is true utility. And I'd like to say, both Judy and Sarai, please pass along to Karen Knudsen my personal appreciation for the work that she has done in organizing her team and providing you with a wonderful resource as we move forward for the future. Mr. Mokrajewski, I think this is all that we have for today, with just one reminder. The DLCD is a Department of Land Conservation and Development. The LCDC is the Land Conservation and Development Commission. We need to maintain close liaison with them, because some of the work that we need to do has to be done through their graces. So any further items for today's agenda for the order of the business of the day? I see no hands in the queue. We have the rest of the day to ourselves, more or less. So we'll see most all of you at the Homes for Good meeting this afternoon. We are adjourned.